I used to think my Grandma Aurora was an open book, bound in sunshine and laughter. Her eyes, the color of a summer sky just after a rain, always held a twinkle, a silent invitation to share a secret or a dream. She was the safest harbor I knew, a place where worries dissolved like sugar in warm tea. Her hands, gnarled with age and etched with the stories of countless harvests, were always ready to knead away a headache or hold me close when the world felt too big. I remember the scent of her lavender and cinnamon, a comforting blend that permeated her small cottage and clung to my clothes long after I'd left. She was the anchor of our family, the one who remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every small victory and quiet sorrow. She told stories of her childhood in Italy, of sun-drenched vineyards and boisterous family gatherings, tales that painted a picture of a life brimming with love and simple joys. She made the world seem manageable, understandable, even when it wasn't. That's why, when they told us she died peacefully in her sleep, it felt right. Fitting. She deserved a gentle ending, a soft landing after a life well lived. We mourned, of course, a deep, aching grief that settled in our bones like a persistent winter chill. But there was also a sense of peace, a quiet acceptance that she had gone on her own terms, surrounded by the love she had so generously given. The days that followed were a blur of arrangements and condolences. The cottage, usually so vibrant with her presence, felt hollow and still. We gathered, as families do, to sort through her belongings, each object a poignant reminder of her life. It was a bittersweet task, filled with laughter and tears, as we shared memories and divided her treasures amongst ourselves. I volunteered to tackle the attic. It was a dusty, cluttered space, crammed with forgotten relics of generations past. Sunlight streamed through the grimy window panes, illuminating swirling dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. Cobwebs clung to everything, draping forgotten furniture and boxes like ghostly shrouds. The air was thick with the scent of dried flowers, mothballs, and thyme. I coughed, pulling my scarf higher over my nose and mouth. It felt like entering another world, a forgotten corner of the past. I started slowly sorting through boxes filled with old photographs, faded letters, and trinkets of little monetary value but immense sentimental worth. I found my father's baby shoes, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, a collection of seashells from a long-ago family vacation, a hand-stitched quilt, its colors muted with age. Each item sparked a memory, a fleeting glimpse into the lives of those who came before me. It was tucked away in the back, behind a stack of moth-eaten blankets and a chipped porcelain doll with vacant eyes. A small wooden box, its surface intricately carved with floral patterns. The wood was dark and worn, polished smooth by years of handling. It was locked. I ran my fingers over the carving, a strange sense of anticipation building within me. It felt different, out of place amongst the other, more familiar objects. I didn't remember ever seeing it before. I called my cousin Leo, who had always been good with locks and puzzles. He arrived an hour later, a small toolkit in hand, his brow furrowed with curiosity. It didn't take him long. With a gentle click, the lock sprung open. We exchanged a nervous glance before lifting the lid together. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a diary. It was bound in dark brown leather, the cover worn and cracked with age. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. It smelled of old paper and something else. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of cloves and something vaguely metallic. The leather felt cool and smooth beneath my fingertips. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my soul that this was something significant, something hidden, something private. I opened the diary, my hands trembling slightly. The first page was dated 1942. The handwriting was unmistakably Aurora's, but it was different from the neat, precise script she used in her later years. This was bolder, more passionate, more alive. The first entry began, "My dearest Marco." Marco. I didn't know any Marco. My grandfather's name was Giovanni. I read on, my breath catching in my throat. The words painted a vivid picture of a young woman caught in the throes of forbidden love. A love that blossomed against the backdrop of a world at war. A love that defied expectations, challenged conventions, and threatened to tear her family apart. As I continued to read, I discovered a side of my grandmother I never knew existed. A side of her that was fierce, independent, and deeply courageous. a side of her that made sacrifices I could scarcely comprehend. There were entries detailing her involvement in the Italian resistance movement, her daring acts of sabotage, her unwavering commitment to protecting her community from the horrors of the Nazi occupation. There were accounts of narrow escapes, heartbreaking losses, and moments of extraordinary bravery. And then there were the entries about Marco, their clandestine meetings, their whispered promises, their shared dreams of a future that seemed increasingly impossible. Their love was a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. But as the war raged on, their love became increasingly perilous. The diary entries grew shorter, more fragmented, filled with fear and uncertainty. The last entry was dated 1945. It was brief, barely a few lines, but it spoke volumes. Marco is gone. They took him. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. All I have left are these memories, these words. I pray that someday someone will find this diary and know the truth. Know that we loved. Know that we fought. Know that we never gave up hope. I closed the diary, my hands shaking. The silence of the attic pressed in on me, broken only by the frantic beating of my own heart. I felt as though I had stumbled upon a secret that had been buried for decades, a secret that had the power to rewrite everything I thought I knew about my grandmother and my family. The woman I thought I knew, the gentle, loving grandmother who baked cookies and told stories, was also a woman of extraordinary strength and resilience, a woman who had lived through unimaginable hardship and made impossible choices, a woman who had loved with a passion that defied time and circumstance. They said she died peacefully in her sleep. But now I couldn't help but wonder about the scratches we found on the inside of the closet door in her bedroom after she passed. Scratches that looked old, but had been recently disturbed. Had she been reliving something in her final days? Something she had kept hidden for all these years? This diary, it was more than just a collection of words on paper. It was a window into a hidden past, a portal to a world of forbidden love, wartime sacrifice, and a legacy that echoed across generations. It was a promise of revelation, a challenge to uncover the truth behind the carefully constructed facade of a life well lived. My grandmother's life was not an open book, as I had once believed. It was a locked chest, filled with secrets waiting to be unlocked. And now I held the key. If you'd like to walk this path with me, to uncover the secrets hidden within the pages of Grandma Aurora's diary, to understand the sacrifices she made and the love she held in her heart, then subscribe and stay close. Because this is just the beginning of a story that will change everything. A story about the enduring power of love, the devastating consequences of war, and the hidden legacies that bind us together, generation after generation. A story that begins not with an ending, but with a whispered secret, waiting to be heard. The scent of lavender and dust motes dancing in sunbeams still clings to those pages. It's funny, isn't it? How a smell can unlock a whole world. A life lived so fully it almost spills out of the past and into the present. Reading those words, it's like I'm right there with her back in Willow Creek. Willow Creek. Even the name sounds like a lullaby. It was a place where time moved at the pace of the seasons, where the loudest sounds were the buzzing of bees in the clover fields and the evening chorus of crickets. This was in the late 1930s, you understand, before the world started shrinking with telephones and automobiles, before the shadows of war stretched across the ocean. It was a pocket of peace, a place where folks knew their neighbors and left their doors unlocked. Our farm wasn't much, just a modest spread of land nestled in a valley carved out by the creek itself. Dad always said the soil was stubborn, but Mom had a way with it. She could coax life out of stones, it seemed. We grew corn and wheat mostly, enough to feed ourselves and have a little left over to sell at the market in town. Aurora. That was me then. A girl with scraped knees and perpetually ink-stained fingers. I wasn't beautiful, not in the way the magazines portrayed beauty, but I had a quick mind and a restless spirit. I devoured books like they were the sweetest peaches, each story a doorway to a world beyond our little valley. I spent hours lying beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the cornfield, lost in tales of faraway lands and daring adventures. Thomas, my older brother, he dreamt of flying. He spent every spare moment tinkering with scraps of metal and wood, sketching designs for airplanes in his notebook. He'd lie on his back in the fields, watching the hawks circle overhead, his eyes filled with longing. He wasn't meant for the farm, not really. His spirit soared higher than the tallest silo. And then there was Lily, my younger sister. A wisp of a girl with eyes the color of violets and a soul as delicate as a butterfly's wing. She wrote poetry, little verses filled with images of the moon and stars and the whispering wind. She saw beauty in everything, even the smallest, most overlooked things. She was a dreamer like me, but her dreams were softer, more ethereal. Our days were simple, filled with the rhythms of farm life. Up before dawn to milk the cows, then breakfast, usually oatmeal with Mom's homemade jam. The mornings were spent in the fields, weeding or harvesting, our hands calloused and our backs aching. It was hard work, but there was a certain satisfaction in it, a connection to the land that ran deep in our blood. Evenings were for family. After supper, we'd gather on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. Dad would tell stories of his own childhood, of the hardships he faced and the lessons he learned. Mom would hum softly, mending clothes or knitting. Thomas would point out constellations in the night sky, explaining the myths and legends behind them. Lily and I would listen, our imaginations taking flight. I remember the smell of wood smoke in the autumn air, the crunch of leaves underfoot as we walked to school. I remember the taste of Mom's apple pie, warm from the oven on Thanksgiving Day. I remember the sound of Thomas's laughter as he chased Lily and me through the fields, his eyes sparkling with mischief. But even in that idyllic world, there was a sense of something missing, a quiet yearning that tugged at my heart. I loved my family, I loved our farm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more out there, something waiting for me beyond the horizon. I'd spend hours staring at the maps in our old atlas, tracing my fingers along the coastlines of distant lands, imagining myself walking through bustling cities and exploring ancient ruins. I dreamt of seeing the ocean, of climbing mountains, of experiencing all the wonders the world had to offer. This wasn't a dissatisfaction with my life, not exactly. It was more like a curiosity, a hunger for knowledge and experience. I felt like a seed planted in fertile soil, eager to sprout and grow, to reach for the sun. I confided in Lily sometimes. She understood. She felt it too, that pull towards something beyond the familiar. But while I dreamt of adventure, she dreamt of beauty. She wanted to capture the world in her poems, to translate its secrets into words. Thomas, bless his heart, just wanted to fly. He didn't care about faraway lands or hidden mysteries. He just wanted to feel the wind beneath his wings, to soar above the clouds. Mom and Dad, they saw our dreams, of course. They didn't always understand them, but they never discouraged us. They knew that we were different, that we weren't meant to follow in their footsteps. They wanted us to be happy, to find our own paths in life. Sometimes, though, I felt a pang of guilt. I knew how much they depended on us, how hard they worked to keep the farm afloat. I wondered if I was being selfish, wanting something more than what they could offer. I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was still and quiet, filled with the scent of honeysuckle. "What are you thinking about, Aurora?" Mom asked, her voice soft. I hesitated, then blurted out, "I want to see the world, Mom. I want to do something important." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "The world will come to you, Aurora," she said. "It always does." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But looking back, I think she knew that our peaceful little world wouldn't last forever. She knew that the shadows were coming, that the war would eventually reach even Willow Creek. And she knew deep down that I wouldn't be able to stay, that my restless spirit would eventually lead me away from the farm, into the unknown. The truth is, even amidst the beauty and the simplicity of Willow Creek, there was always a sense of unease, a feeling that something was about to change, that the world was on the cusp of something big. I couldn't have articulated it then, but I felt it in my bones. Perhaps it was just the natural restlessness of youth, the yearning for something more that every young person feels. Or perhaps it was something else, a premonition of the storms to come. Whatever it was, it stayed with me, a constant undercurrent beneath the surface of my peaceful life. It fueled my dreams, my ambitions, my desire to see the world. And it made the scratches on that closet door all the more unsettling. Because even in Willow Creek, even in the heart of my family, there were secrets. And secrets, like shadows, have a way of growing in the dark. They said she died peacefully in her sleep. Then we found the scratches on the inside of the closet. That simple sentence, whispered amongst the women at the market, hung in the air like smoke, a chilling premonition of the darkness that was slowly creeping into our lives. It was about Mrs. Gable, a woman known for her apple pies and gentle humming. Willow Creek hadn't seen a violent death in decades. Old age accidents, yes. But scratches? The idyllic rhythm of our lives, the soft lullaby of the creek and the comforting scent of Mama's bread baking, began to falter. The war, a distant rumble until then, started to intrude. It oozed in through the radio, crackling with static and pronouncements from men with grave voices. It was in the hushed conversations at the general store, where men gathered, their faces etched with worry as they discussed battles fought in places most of us couldn't even pronounce. Letters arrived, bearing the thin blue airmail stamps. Letters from cousins in Europe, full of censored words and underlying fear. Letters that Mama would read aloud, her voice trembling slightly, before folding them carefully and tucking them away in her hope chest, alongside her wedding veil and pressed wildflowers. Thomas, my brother, was practically bursting with a feverish excitement. He'd listened to the war reports with a gleam in his eye, his chest puffed out, dreaming of becoming a hero. "Think of it, Aurora," he'd say, leaning close, his voice hushed with adventure. "A chance to see the world, to fight for what's right." Mama, bless her soul, saw only the potential for loss. Her hands, usually so steady when kneading dough or mending clothes, would tremble when she heard news of another ship sunk or a town bombed. The lines around her eyes deepened, etched by worry for her sons, for her husband's business, for the future she had always envisioned for her children. Papa, usually a man of quiet strength, grew more silent, his brow furrowed as he pored over the newspaper, the grim headlines reflecting in his spectacles. He'd spend hours in his workshop, the rhythmic hammering replaced by a hesitant, uncertain tapping, as if he were building something to protect us, something that could shield us from the storm gathering on the horizon. And me? I felt a disquiet settling in my soul, a restlessness that went beyond the simple yearning for romance I'd felt before. The world felt different. The colors seemed less vibrant, the laughter less carefree. The war wasn't just a story on the radio. It was a shadow lengthening across our lives, a weight pressing down on our collective spirit. The romantic dreams I had nurtured, the fantasies of a handsome stranger sweeping me off my feet, seemed suddenly frivolous. How could I think of dances and courtship when young men were dying on foreign shores? How could I dream of a future when the future itself felt so uncertain? One evening, just as the fireflies were beginning their nightly dance, a truck rattled into Willow Creek, its engine sputtering and coughing like an old man with consumption. It stopped in front of the old Miller house, a place that had been empty for years, ever since old Mr. Miller had passed away and his children had moved to the city. A young man stepped out, his uniform rumpled and dusty, his face etched with a weariness that belied his age. He was different. Not like the boys from around here, the ones I'd known since kindergarten, the ones who smelled of hay and honest sweat. This young man, even in his disheveled state, possessed an air of something. A quiet intensity, a contained energy that radiated from him like heat from a stove. His posture was different, straighter, more disciplined. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, held a depth that seemed to swallow the light, reflecting a world I couldn't even begin to imagine. He moved with a grace that was almost unsettling, a silent efficiency that spoke of training and purpose. His name was Elias. He introduced himself to Mrs. Olson, who lived next door to the Miller house and was known for her sharp eyes and even sharper tongue. I was fetching water from the well when he spoke, and I pretended not to listen, but every fiber of my being strained to catch his words. He said he was on leave, that he needed a place to stay for a while, that he was recovering. Recovering from what? He didn't say. The local boys, the ones who spent their days fishing in the creek and dreaming of inheriting their father's farms, were drawn to him like moths to a flame. They'd gather around him in the evenings, listening to his stories with rapt attention, their eyes wide with admiration and a touch of envy. But Elias, while polite, remained distant. He answered their questions with carefully chosen words, revealing nothing of himself. He was a closed book bound tight with secrets. Our first real encounter was accidental. I was walking home from the library, my arms laden with books, when I tripped over a root, sending my precious cargo scattering across the dusty road. Before I could react, Elias was there, kneeling beside me, gathering the books with a swift, practiced motion. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. I blushed, mortified. Yes, thank you, I stammered, trying to collect myself. Just clumsy, I guess. He smiled, a brief, fleeting expression that transformed his face. We all stumble sometimes, he said, handing me the books. His fingers brushed against mine, sending a jolt of electricity through me. It wasn't an unpleasant sensation, but it was definitely unexpected. His eyes held mine for a moment, and I felt a strange, unsettling pull, a sense of recognition that made no logical sense. It was as if I knew him, or at least a part of him, even though we had just met. I'm Elias, he said, extending his hand. Aurora, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood there for a moment, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the radio from a nearby farmhouse. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent understanding that something had shifted, something had changed. He wasn't like anyone I had ever met. There was a darkness in his eyes, a shadow that hinted at experiences I couldn't comprehend. But there was also a vulnerability, a hidden tenderness that drew me to him despite my better judgment. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn to him. I'd see him walking through the woods, his head bowed, his expression lost in thought. I'd catch glimpses of him working in the garden behind the Miller house, his movements precise and efficient, as if he were performing a delicate surgery. I'd hear him playing the harmonica on the porch in the evenings, the mournful melodies echoing through the valley, filling the air with a bittersweet longing. He never spoke of the war, never revealed anything about his past. He was a mystery, a puzzle I couldn't resist trying to solve. And the more I tried, the more entangled I became. One afternoon, I saw him talking to a man I didn't recognize, a man dressed in a dark suit, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices barely audible above the rustling leaves. When the man left, Elias stood there for a long time, staring after him, his expression unreadable. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in my bed, my mind racing with questions. Who was that man? What were they talking about? What was Elias hiding? The next morning I found a small, intricately carved wooden bird on my doorstep. It was a robin, its wings outstretched as if in flight. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was from Elias. I held the bird in my hand, tracing the delicate carvings with my fingertips. It was beautiful, hauntingly so, but it also felt dangerous. It felt like a symbol, a message, a promise of something that I couldn't quite grasp. The war was coming closer, its shadow growing longer, its grip tightening on our lives. And Elias, with his secrets and his silences, was at the center of it all. I knew with a growing sense of dread that my life was about to change, that I was about to be swept up in something far bigger than myself, something that would test my courage, my loyalty, and my very soul. The scratches on the inside of Mrs. Gable's closet suddenly felt less like a local tragedy and more like a universal omen. The peace of Willow Creek was ending, and the world, with all its hidden dangers and forbidden desires, was about to begin. And I, Aurora, was standing on the precipice ready to fall. The scratches, those frantic gouges etched into the closet's inner wall, remained a raw, unspoken accusation. They haunted my waking hours, a silent scream trapped within the wood. The coroner, a man whose face had seen too much death to register surprise, had dismissed them. Post-mortem spasms, he'd mumbled, closing the case. But my heart, that ancient compass, knew better. Mama hadn't died peacefully. Something had terrified her in those final moments. The grief was a heavy cloak, but beneath its weight, a flicker of defiance sparked. I couldn't let it consume me. Mama wouldn't have wanted that. Life, even in the teeth of a brewing storm, had to go on. And if I were honest with myself, a small, insistent voice whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, life could even hold joy again. Elias. Just the whisper of his name sent a warmth spreading through my chest, a fragile bloom in the barren landscape of my sorrow. We met in secret, stolen moments carved out from the anxieties of the day. The abandoned mill on the outskirts of town became our sanctuary. The rhythmic creak of the water wheel, long since dried up, was a melancholy serenade to our whispered hopes and fears. He would wait for me there, amidst the cobwebs and the scent of damp earth. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, always held a tenderness that belied the shadows lurking within. He would hold me close, the gentle pressure of his embrace a balm to my aching soul. We talked of everything and nothing, the changing colors of the leaves, the gossip swirling through town, the books we'd loved as children. And in those moments the war, the fear, the scratches on the closet wall, all seemed to fade into a distant hum. One evening, as the autumn sun bled crimson across the horizon, Elias's usual composure seemed to crack. His hands trembled as he held mine, his voice barely a whisper. "Aurora," he began, his gaze fixed on the swirling dust motes dancing in the fading light. "There is something I must tell you. Something I should have told you sooner." He confessed then, the truth tumbling out in a torrent of hushed words. He wasn't a watchmaker, not entirely. He was a scientist, a German scientist. He had worked on a project for the Nazi regime, a project he now deeply regretted. But he had seen the true nature of their ambitions, the chilling ruthlessness that lay beneath the veneer of patriotism. He had deserted, risking everything to escape. His mission, he explained, was to find something, an encryption device, a machine of immense power, before it fell into the wrong hands. It was hidden somewhere in Willow Creek, entrusted to the care of his mentor, a clockmaker named Herr Schmidt, years ago. Herr Schmidt, before his death, had sent Elias cryptic clues, riddles woven into the intricate workings of a clock. "I am hunted, Aurora," he said, his voice thick with desperation. "By both sides. If the Nazis find me, or the device." He didn't finish the sentence, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. My initial shock gave way to a strange sense of understanding. His guardedness, his melancholy, the haunted look in his eyes. It all made sense now. I knew I should be terrified, that his confession had dragged me into a world of danger I could barely comprehend. But instead, a surge of protectiveness washed over me. This man, this gentle soul caught in the gears of a monstrous machine, needed my help. And God help me, I wanted to give it. The days that followed were fraught with tension. Willow Creek, once a haven of quiet predictability, felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Strangers appeared in town, their eyes cold and calculating. They asked seemingly innocuous questions, probing for information, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. The grocer, Mrs. Abernathy, whispered about a car with German license plates parked on the outskirts of town. Fear, like a creeping vine, began to strangle the life out of our little community. We worked tirelessly, Elias and I, deciphering Herr Schmidt's clues. The clockmaker had been a master of puzzles, his riddles layered with symbolism and double meanings. After weeks of painstaking work, poring over blueprints and historical maps, we finally cracked the code. The clues pointed to the old church, specifically to a hidden labyrinth beneath the sanctuary. The church had been abandoned for years, its steeple a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the sky. Legend had it that the labyrinth was built centuries ago, a refuge for persecuted religious minorities. It was a place of shadows and whispers, a place where secrets could be buried deep. As we prepared to venture into the labyrinth, a wave of fear washed over me. I was no longer just Aurora, the grieving daughter, the quiet observer. I was an active participant in a dangerous game. A game with stakes far higher than I could have ever imagined. The decision to go, to risk everything for Elias, felt like a betrayal of my family, of the quiet life I had always known. That night, I poured my heart into my diary. The words flowed freely, a torrent of fear, love, and confusion. I wrote of my devotion to Elias, of my fear for his safety, of my growing realization that I was no longer the same woman I had been just weeks ago. The war had changed me, had stripped away my innocence and forced me to confront the darkness that lurked within the world, and within myself. Dear Diary, I wrote, my hand trembling. I am terrified. I am risking everything. But I cannot stand by and watch as evil triumphs. I must fight for Elias, for Mama, for the future. I pray I am strong enough. Closing the diary, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I was still afraid, but I was also resolute. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew that I would face it with courage, with love, and with a fierce determination to protect the man who had shown me that even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom. The scratches on the closet wall were still there, a reminder of the evil that lurked in the shadows. But now they were also a call to action, a silent plea for justice. And I, Aurora, was finally ready to answer. The air in the crypt hung thick and cold, a dampness that seeped into our bones. The final tumblers clicked into place with a sound that echoed like a death knell in the confined space. Elias, his face illuminated by the flickering beam of his lamp, pushed open the heavy oak door. It groaned in protest, revealing a narrow passage leading further down, further into the earth. "This is it," he breathed, his voice hushed with a mixture of trepidation and triumph. I could see the lines etched deeper around his eyes, the weariness of weeks spent chasing shadows and deciphering riddles. But beneath the fatigue, there was a spark of determination, a fierce protectiveness that always made my heart ache with a love that felt both ancient and brand new. The passage opened into a small circular chamber. Dust motes danced in the lamplight, illuminating walls covered in intricate carvings. The air smelled of old stone and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like the scent of ozone after a lightning strike. In the center of the room, resting on a simple stone pedestal, was it. It wasn't what I expected. Not a weapon, not a jewel-encrusted artifact. It was a small, unassuming box made of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols that seemed both familiar and alien. It pulsed with a faint, inner light, a subtle hum that resonated deep in my chest. Elias approached it cautiously, his hand outstretched. "The chronometer," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Professor Armitage's masterpiece." As his fingers brushed against the wood, a deafening crash erupted from behind us. The passage we just navigated collapsed inward, sealing our escape. Before we could react, figures emerged from the newly created opening, their faces grim and determined. "Nazi soldiers. You are surrounded," one of them barked in heavily accented French. "Drop your weapons and surrender." Elias pushed me behind him, his hand reaching for the pistol tucked into his waistband. "Run, Aurora," he yelled, his voice strained. "Get the chronometer to Switzerland. Get it to the resistance." I froze, paralyzed by fear. Run? Leave him? The thought was unbearable. "I won't leave you," I cried, my voice shaking. "You have to," he insisted, his eyes pleading. "This is bigger than us, Aurora. Bigger than anything." The soldiers opened fire. The small chamber erupted in chaos. Bullets ricocheted off the stone walls, sending showers of sparks into the air. Elias returned fire, his movements quick and precise. He was a whirlwind of motion, deflecting bullets and buying me precious seconds. I knew he was right. I had to get the chronometer out of here. But the thought of leaving him to face these monsters alone tore at my soul. I dove behind the pedestal, my fingers fumbling for the chronometer. I grabbed it, clutching it tight against my chest, as if it could somehow protect me from the horror unfolding around me. Elias was wounded. I saw him stagger, a crimson stain blooming on his shoulder. But he kept fighting, his face a mask of grim determination. "Go, Aurora," he screamed again, his voice hoarse. "Now." Tears streamed down my face as I turned and fled. I ran blindly, my heart pounding in my chest, the chronometer digging into my ribs. I knew the labyrinthine passages better than anyone, thanks to Elias. I prayed that knowledge would be enough. I could hear the soldiers behind me, their heavy boots echoing in the narrow corridors. I dodged and weaved, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I remembered the secret passages Elias had shown me, the hidden alcoves and false walls that only he and Professor Armitage had known about. I reached a dead end. Panic clawed at my throat. But then I remembered something Elias had said, a riddle Professor Armitage had posed. Where the light fears to tread, the truth lies hidden. I looked up. Above me, a small crack of light filtered through a seemingly solid wall. I reached up, my fingers probing the stone. I found a hidden latch, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. I squeezed through, pulling the chronometer after me. The passage led downward, into the bowels of the earth. I could hear the soldiers crashing around behind me, their frustration growing with each wrong turn. I kept running, driven by a primal instinct to survive. Finally, I emerged into a small, disused cellar beneath the church. A single rickety wooden door led to the outside world. I pushed it open and stumbled out into the night. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. I didn't stop until I reached the outskirts of the village, collapsing behind a thicket of bushes, gasping for air. I was alone. The chronometer was safe, but at what cost? I clutched the wooden box to my chest, my tears soaking into the aged wood. He was gone. Elias was gone. The love of my life, the man who had shown me the beauty of the world, the man who had awakened my soul was gone. The pain was unbearable. A gaping hole in my heart that threatened to swallow me whole. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the world apart. But I couldn't. I had a mission now. Promise to keep. A legacy to uphold. I opened the diary, my fingers trembling. I dipped the pen into the inkwell and began to write. Elias is gone. The words looked stark and brutal on the page, a cold, hard truth that I couldn't escape. Asterisk, they found us. The chronometer is safe, but he sacrificed himself for me. For the mission. Asterisk, I wrote about the battle in the crypt, the chaos, the fear, the unbearable pain of watching him fall. I wrote about his courage, his selflessness, his unwavering belief in the cause. Asterisk, he gave me the chronometer and told me to run. He told me it was bigger than us. Asterisk, I didn't understand what he meant. How could anything be bigger than the love we shared? How could any mission be worth his life? But as I wrote, a glimmer of understanding began to dawn. It wasn't just about the chronometer. It was about freedom, about justice, about the future. It was about protecting the world from the darkness that threatened to engulf it. And Elias had entrusted me with that responsibility. He had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I will not let him down, I wrote, my hand shaking with determination. Asterisk, I will get the chronometer to Switzerland. I will deliver it to the resistance. I will honor his sacrifice. Asterisk, the diary became my lifeline, my confidant, my anchor in the storm of grief that raged within me. I wrote about my memories of Elias, about his smile, his laugh, the way he used to look at me with such tenderness. I wrote about our dreams, our hopes, our plans for the future. A future that would now never be. I also wrote about my fear, my doubt, my uncertainty. I was just a young woman, alone in a war-torn world, carrying a burden that seemed too heavy to bear. But with each entry I felt a little stronger, a little more resolute. Elias's love was a flame that burned within me, a source of strength that I could draw upon in my darkest moments. The chronometer was more than just a device. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable evil, there was still the possibility of redemption. And I, Aurora, was now its guardian. I closed the diary, my heart aching with grief, but also filled with a newfound sense of purpose. I looked up at the stars, searching for some sign, some reassurance that Elias was still with me. I didn't find it, but I did find something else, a quiet determination, a steely resolve that I never knew I possessed. I was no longer just Aurora. I was Aurora, carrying the legacy of Elias, carrying the hope of a better future. And I would not fail him. I would not fail the world. I would keep writing. I would keep fighting. I would keep living for him, for myself, for the generations to come. Because that, I realized, was the truest way to honor his sacrifice. That was the only way to keep his memory alive. And that was the only way to ensure that his love would never die. The labyrinth spat me out. Not gently, not with ceremony, but like a bad taste. I stumbled into the pre-dawn air, the stone biting at my bare feet. My chest burned, each breath a ragged reminder. Elias was gone. I ran. Not toward anything but away. Away from the cold, the dark, the memory of his hand in mine. Away from the impossible choice he made. I ran until my lungs screamed and my legs threatened to buckle. I ran until I reached the edge of the woods and could see the faint glow of my house in the distance. Home. Felt like a betrayal. How could the world be the same when he wasn't in it? I slipped in through the back door. The familiar creak of the hinges a deafening alarm. My mother would be up soon making coffee. I had to be fast. I cleaned the mud from my feet in the kitchen sink, wincing at the sight of my reflection in the dark window. Bruises bloomed on my arms, a map of the labyrinth etched onto my skin. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, but the marks remained. Upstairs I changed into clean clothes, burying the stained ones deep in the hamper. I avoided the mirror in my room, afraid of what I might see. A ghost? A monster? Someone who had watched a good man die? The artifact. I pulled it from my pocket, the cold metal a sharp contrast to the frantic heat of my skin. It was heavier now, laden with the weight of Elias's sacrifice. I hid it under the floorboards in my closet, beneath a stack of old photo albums. Safe for now. I slipped into bed just as the first rays of sun peeked through the curtains. Exhaustion pulled me under, but sleep offered no escape. I saw his face, heard his voice, felt the warmth of his hand. Then the darkness, the fall, the silence. When I woke, the house was filled with the smell of coffee and the murmur of voices. My mother knocked softly on my door. "Aurora? Are you awake? You missed breakfast." I forced myself to sit up, my body aching in protest. "Coming," I croaked, my voice thick with sleep and unshed tears. Downstairs, the air was thick with unspoken concern. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. "There was an accident," she said, her voice trembling. "Elias, he didn't make it." An accident. That's what they were calling it. A tragic accident. A tree falling in the wrong place at the wrong time. A lie. A carefully constructed, soul-crushing lie. I nodded, unable to speak. The grief was a physical thing, a lead weight in my chest that stole my breath. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tell them the truth. But I couldn't. Elias had entrusted me with a secret, a burden, and I had to carry it alone. The next few days were a blur of hushed voices, sympathetic glances, and endless casseroles. People came and went, offering condolences, sharing memories. I smiled and nodded, played the part of the grieving friend. Inside, I was hollowed out, a shell filled with a grief so profound it threatened to consume me. I avoided Elias's family, unable to face their pain. How could I look them in the eye knowing the truth? Knowing that their son, their brother, had died saving me? At night, when the house was quiet, I would slip into the closet and stare at the floorboards beneath which the artifact lay hidden. Sometimes I would take it out, hold it in my hands, and feel the faint echo of Elias's presence. It was a cold comfort, but it was all I had. I opened the diary for the first time since everything. The leather felt strange beneath my fingers, unfamiliar. It was as if Elias's absence had changed even inanimate objects. The pages were filled with his familiar script, his thoughts, his dreams. I traced the letters with my finger, trying to conjure his voice, his laughter, his smile. My own entries were sparse, filled with teenage angst and trivial concerns. How could I have been so blind, so oblivious to the world around me, to the darkness that lurked beneath the surface? I found a blank page and began to write. Not with the eloquent prose that Elias had favored, but with raw, broken words that poured from my heart. I wrote about the labyrinth, about the creature, about Elias's sacrifice. I wrote about my grief, my rage, my guilt. I wrote until my hand cramped and the ink ran dry. Writing didn't ease the pain, but it gave it shape, gave it a voice. It was a way to honor Elias's memory, to keep him alive in my heart. The world felt different now. Sharper, more dangerous. I noticed shadows where I hadn't before, saw the flicker of suspicion in people's eyes. I felt the weight of the artifact, the burden of the secret I carried. One afternoon, while my parents were out, I snuck into Elias's room. It was just as he had left it, his books stacked neatly on his desk, his map spread out on the wall. I ran my fingers over the spines of his books, searching for a clue, a sign, anything that could help me understand what he had been searching for. I found it hidden beneath a stack of papers, a small leather-bound notebook filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams. I recognized some of them from the labyrinth, others were unfamiliar. I felt a flicker of hope, a spark of purpose in the darkness. Elias hadn't died in vain. He had left me a legacy, a mission. And I, Aurora, would see it through. I started small, researching the symbols in the notebook, poring over old texts in the local library. I learned about ancient languages, forgotten myths, hidden histories. I felt Elias's presence beside me, guiding me, urging me forward. The grief was still there, a constant ache in my heart, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was a fuel, a motivation. I would honor Elias's memory by finishing what he had started. I would protect the world from the darkness that he had fought so hard to contain. I was still grieving, still broken, but I was no longer adrift. I had a purpose, a mission, a reason to keep going. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift Elias could have given me. They said she died peacefully in her sleep. Then we found the scratches on the inside of the closet. Such a tidy woman, my mother. Always. That closet was the only place she ever let things get chaotic. And even then, it was a controlled chaos of fabric and forgotten dreams. But those scratches weren't fabric. They were raw, desperate. That's how it started, you see. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, horrifying realization that the story we'd been told was a lie. That someone or something had taken my mother, and that the peace she deserved had been stolen from her in the final moments. I was young then, barely a woman myself, still clinging to the edges of childhood. Willow Creek, our little town nestled in the heart of nowhere, suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I couldn't stay there, not with the memory of her, not with the fear that clung to the air like morning mist. Elias, bless his soul, had left me more than just memories. He had left me a mission, a burden, and a terrible, beautiful secret. And that secret made me a target. So I left, packed a single suitcase, the weight of Elias's diary pressing against my ribs, and boarded a bus heading for the anonymity of the city. The city was a beast, roaring and indifferent. I found a small room in a boarding house, the kind where the wallpaper peeled and the floorboards groaned underfoot. It was a far cry from the cozy familiarity of Willow Creek, but it was safe, or at least it felt that way for a while. The city was a labyrinth, a place where I could lose myself, become someone else. And that's exactly what I did. I shed the skin of the grieving daughter and began to build a new one, brick by painstaking brick. The first few weeks were a blur of disorientation and loneliness. I missed the scent of my mother's baking, the sound of the creek gurgling behind our house, the comforting rhythm of small-town life. But I knew I couldn't go back. Not yet. Elias's diary became my constant companion, my Rosetta Stone. His handwriting, once so familiar and comforting, now felt like a lifeline thrown across a vast, dark ocean. He had filled it with sketches, diagrams, cryptic notes, all centered around the artifact, the small, unassuming box he had entrusted to my mother. At first, I thought it was simply a sophisticated encryption device, a way to send secret messages. But as I delved deeper into Elias's research, a terrifying truth began to emerge. The artifact was more than just a code machine. It was an intelligence tool, a window into the enemy's mind. It could decipher their codes, anticipate their movements, reveal their secrets. It was power, raw and terrifying, and it was now in my possession. The city's libraries became my sanctuary. I devoured books on cryptography, history, linguistics, anything that might shed light on the artifact's workings. I spent hours poring over maps, studying troop movements, trying to understand the larger context of the war. I even sought out discreet consultations with academics, presenting myself as a curious student, carefully probing for information without revealing my true purpose. They probably thought me a bit odd, this young woman with haunted eyes and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, but they were kind enough to indulge me. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. To protect the artifact, I needed to be more than just a scholar. I needed to be a spy. It wasn't something I ever envisioned for myself, this life of shadows and secrets. I learned to observe, to listen, to blend into the background. I studied faces, body language, the subtle cues that betray a person's true intentions. I learned to move silently, to disappear into a crowd, to become invisible. One of my favorite haunts was a small, smoky jazz club on the edge of town. The music was intoxicating, the atmosphere thick with secrets. It was a place where people came to forget, to escape, to whisper things they wouldn't dare say in the light of day. I learned to eavesdrop, to filter the noise, to pick out the threads of conversation that might be useful. I'd sit in a dark corner, nursing a watered-down drink, my eyes scanning the room, my ears attuned to every murmur. It was there, in the smoky haze of the jazz club, that I first encountered them. Two men dressed in sharp suits, their faces hard and unyielding. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes constantly darting around the room. I couldn't understand their language, but there was something about their demeanor, their intensity, that set off alarm bells in my mind. They were looking for something or someone, and I had a terrible feeling that that something was me. I started varying my routines, changing my appearance, taking circuitous routes to and from the library. I learned to spot the signs of surveillance, the parked car that seemed to be always in the same place, the man with the newspaper who never seemed to read it, the fleeting glimpse of a face in a crowd. I became adept at losing them, at melting into the urban landscape. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, a terrifying dance that I knew I couldn't afford to lose. The loneliness was the hardest part. I missed my mother terribly, the warmth of her presence, the comfort of her advice. I missed Elias, his gentle wisdom, his unwavering belief in me. I was alone in this fight, carrying a burden that threatened to crush me. Some nights I would lie awake in my small room, the city's cacophony a distant hum, and I would weep silently, tears of grief and fear. But then I would remember Elias, his sacrifices, his unwavering dedication to the cause. I would remember my mother, her quiet strength, her fierce love. And I would find the strength to go on, to keep fighting, to protect the artifact at all costs. One evening, as I was returning to my room, I noticed a shadow lurking in the doorway. A figure, tall and menacing, stepped out of the darkness. He spoke in a harsh, guttural voice, demanding to know where it was. The artifact. I denied knowing anything, of course, but his eyes held a chilling certainty. He knew I had it. He lunged for me, but I was ready. I had learned to fight, to defend myself. I dodged his attack, kicked him in the shins, and fled into the night. That night I didn't sleep. I knew they were closing in. I knew I couldn't stay in the city any longer. It was time to move on, to find a new hiding place, a new identity. It was time to become even more invisible. As I packed my meager belongings, I caught a glimpse of myself in the cracked mirror. The face that stared back at me was not the face of the grieving daughter who had left Willow Creek. It was the face of a survivor, a warrior, a guardian. It was the face of a woman who had been forged in the fires of adversity. A woman who was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I left the city under the cover of darkness, leaving behind the only life I had known for the past few months. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. The artifact was too important, the stakes too high. I had a mission to fulfill, a promise to keep. And I wouldn't let anything or anyone stand in my way. The road ahead was long and uncertain, filled with danger and hardship. But I was ready. I had learned to adapt, to survive, to fight. I was Aurora, the guardian of the secret, and I would not be broken. Not now, not ever. Because the scratches on the inside of that closet, they weren't just scratches. They were a promise. A promise to remember, a promise to avenge, and a promise to protect. And promises, my dear, are meant to be kept. The war child, it was a ravenous beast. It demanded everything, swallowed whole the young and bright, and left behind a landscape scarred with loss. Your grandma Aurora, bless her soul, she fed that beast pieces of herself, day after day, until finally, it choked and sputtered its last. The artifact, Elias's gift, it became her weapon. Not in the way guns or bombs are weapons, spitting fire and destruction. No, this was a weapon of whispers, of subtle shifts in the tide. She learned to listen to it, to feel the ebb and flow of information, to discern the truth hidden beneath layers of coded messages and propaganda. Remember, she was just a woman, barely more than a girl when all of this began. But that little box, that intricate piece of metal and glass, it amplified her. It allowed her to intercept enemy communications, to decipher their plans, to send warnings to those who needed them most. It was a lonely battle, fought in the quiet hours of the night, the only sound the gentle hum of the artifact and the frantic beating of her own heart. She told me once, years later, her hands gnarled with age, that she felt Elias with her then. Not in a ghostly way, no, but in the echoes of his love, his ingenuity, his unwavering belief in the good of humanity. He had entrusted her with this burden, this responsibility, and she would not fail him, or the countless others whose lives hung in the balance. There were moments, of course, when the pressure was almost unbearable, when the weight of the world seemed to rest upon her slender shoulders. She would see the faces of the soldiers in the newsreels, young men barely old enough to shave, and wonder if her efforts were enough, if the intelligence she provided would reach them in time, if they would come home. One instance I remember her mentioning involved a planned ambush on a convoy heading towards the front lines. The enemy had meticulously laid their trap, choosing a narrow mountain pass where escape would be impossible. But Aurora, listening through the artifact, caught wind of their scheme. She worked tirelessly, deciphering the coordinates, the timing, the number of troops involved. She relayed the information to the Allied forces, and the convoy was rerouted just in time. They avoided the ambush and countless lives were saved. She never knew the names of the men she saved, never saw their faces, but she carried their gratitude within her, a silent chorus of thank yous that echoed in her soul. It was this, she said, that kept her going, even when she felt like giving up. The artifact, she explained, wasn't perfect. It was susceptible to interference, to jamming. And the enemy, they were always learning, always adapting. There were times when she would lose the signal, when the static would become deafening, and she would be left to rely on her instincts, her intuition. Those were the hardest moments, the moments when she felt truly alone. But she persevered. She learned to anticipate the enemy's moves, to predict their strategies. She became a master of deception, feeding them false information, leading them down blind alleys. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent guardian angel watching over the Allied forces. Then one day the news came. The war was over. I remember her telling me about that day, her voice thick with emotion. She was sitting at her desk, hunched over the artifact, listening for any sign of trouble. But instead she heard silence. A profound, deafening silence. At first she didn't understand. She thought something had gone wrong. But then the radio crackled to life, and the announcer's voice boomed through the room. The war is over. Victory is ours. She sank back in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Relief washed over her, so intense that it almost knocked her off her feet. She had done it. She had played her part. She had helped to bring the war to an end. But amidst the joy and celebration, there was also a profound sadness. Elias was gone. He would never see the peace he had longed for. He would never know the impact his invention had had on the world. She spent the next few days in a daze, wandering through the streets, watching the celebrations unfold. People were dancing, singing, embracing. But Aurora felt like an outsider, a ghost in her own life. She had spent so long immersed in the war, in the secrecy and danger, that she didn't know how to simply be. So she made a choice. She decided to leave the city, to return to the quiet simplicity of Willow Creek. She sold her apartment, packed her belongings, and said goodbye to the life she had known. Willow Creek was a balm to her soul. The gentle rustling of the leaves, the babbling of the brook, the warmth of the sun on her face. It all soothed her, healed her. She bought a small cottage on the edge of town, with a garden overflowing with flowers. She spent her days tending to her plants, reading books, and taking long walks in the woods. She also dedicated herself to helping others. She volunteered at the local hospital, comforting the wounded soldiers who were returning home. She taught children to read, sharing her love of books and knowledge. She became a pillar of the community, a source of strength and compassion for those who needed it most. The artifact, she kept it. She couldn't bear to part with it. It was a reminder of Elias, of their love, of the sacrifices they had made. She kept it hidden away in a beautiful, intricately carved music box, the kind that played a tinkling melody when you opened it. The music softened the sharp edges of memory, making the past a little less painful to revisit. That music box, child, that was more than just a container for a wartime artifact. It was a symbol of her heart, holding both the sorrow of loss and the enduring power of love. She understood then that Elias's gift wasn't just about winning a war. It was about connecting with others, about understanding the world in a deeper, more meaningful way. And that, my dear, is how Aurora became the grandmother you knew. The woman with the gentle smile, the twinkling eyes, and the endless supply of warm cookies. She never spoke much about the war or the artifact. She preferred to focus on the present, on the simple joys of life. But every now and then, when the light caught her eye just so, you could see a flicker of the past, a hint of the extraordinary woman she had once been. She carried the weight of her experiences with grace, transforming the pain and loss into wisdom and compassion. She taught me and countless others the importance of kindness, of forgiveness, of living each day to the fullest. Looking back now, I understand that the diary, that collection of her thoughts and memories, was her way of sharing her story, of passing on her legacy. She knew that one day I would find it, and that I would understand the true depth of her character, the extraordinary courage that lay hidden beneath her quiet exterior. And now, child, you understand too. You know the story of your Grandma Aurora, the woman who helped to win a war with a whisper, the woman who found peace in the simple things, the woman who taught us all how to love and to live. Her life was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still prevail. And the music box, the one that held the artifact, it still sits on my mantelpiece. Sometimes when I'm feeling lost or overwhelmed, I open it up and listen to the tinkling melody. And I remember Aurora, and I remember Elias, And I remember that even the smallest of actions can have the greatest of impacts. And I know that everything will be all right. Because their love, their sacrifice, their legacy, it lives on in me and in you. That's the real magic, child. The magic of a life well lived. A love that never fades, and a story that will continue to be told generation after generation. The funeral was quiet, subdued. The kind of quiet that settles after a long illness. A weary acceptance more than a sharp, agonizing grief. They said she died peacefully in her sleep. And for a while I believed them. It was easier to believe. Easier than the alternative, the unsettling image that clawed its way into my mind every time I closed my eyes. The scratches on the inside of the closet door. Scratches that hadn't been there before. Scratches that told a story no one else seemed to want to hear. The house felt hollow after everyone left. The familiar scent of lavender and old books, usually a comforting blanket, now felt like a shroud. I wandered through the rooms, touching the worn furniture, the faded photographs, each object a silent testament to a life lived, a life I thought I knew. But the diary had whispered doubts, had chipped away at the carefully constructed image I held of my grandmother, Aurora. I found myself back in her study, the room where I had spent countless hours as a child, listening to her stories. Stories of brave knights and mischievous fairies, of talking animals and enchanted forests. Stories I had dismissed as whimsical fantasies, charming distractions meant to entertain a restless child. Now they echoed in my mind with a different resonance, a deeper meaning that I was only beginning to grasp. The diary lay open on the desk, its pages filled with her looping script, a record of her secret life, her hidden struggles. I picked it up, the leather cover cool beneath my fingertips, and began to read. Not with the feverish curiosity of a detective searching for clues, but with the gentle reverence of someone holding a sacred text. The words swam before my eyes, a kaleidoscope of emotions. Fear, yes, but also resilience, a fierce determination to protect those she loved. The stories she had told me as a child, the fairy tales I had so readily accepted, were not mere inventions. They were allegories, veiled accounts of her own experiences, her own battles. The brave knight facing the dragon was not some mythical hero, but Aurora herself, confronting the darkness that threatened to consume her. The enchanted forest was the world she had created around us, a sanctuary built on secrets and sacrifices. The story of the little bird trapped in a gilded cage, longing for the freedom of the open sky, suddenly made sense. It wasn't just a cautionary tale about the dangers of materialism. It was about Aurora's own yearning for escape, her desire to break free from the constraints of her life, the expectations that had been placed upon her. The scratches on the closet door. They weren't just the frantic marks of a woman facing her final moments. They were the culmination of a lifetime of suppressed anger, of unspoken fears, of a desperate fight for survival. I closed the diary, the weight of its secrets pressing down on me. I had always seen Aurora as a gentle, loving grandmother, a comforting presence in my life. I had never imagined the depths of her pain, the strength of her spirit. I had taken her stories for granted, dismissing them as childish amusements, failing to recognize the wisdom hidden within their fantastical narratives. My hands trembled as I traced the faded ink on the cover of the diary. It wasn't just a collection of words, a record of the past. It was a map to Aurora's soul, a guide to understanding the woman she truly was, the woman she had hidden beneath layers of smiles and comforting words. The realization washed over me like a tidal wave, a profound understanding that shifted my perspective on everything I thought I knew about her, about myself, about the world. Aurora's legacy wasn't in the grand gestures, the tangible possessions she left behind. It was in the quiet strength she had embodied, the wisdom she had shared through her stories, the unconditional love she had showered upon me. It was in the way she had faced her own demons, her own dragons with unwavering courage, even in the face of unimaginable fear. I remembered a story she had told me about a woman who had lost everything, but who found the strength to rebuild her life, brick by brick, until she had created something even more beautiful than what she had lost. At the time I had thought it was just a nice story, a feel-good tale meant to inspire hope. Now I understood that it was a reflection of Aurora's own journey, her own determination to overcome adversity and create a life filled with love and meaning. The weight of her secrets, the weight of her pain, shifted from a burden to a gift. It was a gift of understanding, a gift of empathy, a gift of connection that transcended time and space. I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of my grandmother. I was grieving the loss of a part of myself, the part that had been nurtured by her love, shaped by her stories, inspired by her courage. I walked over to the window, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. The garden was in full bloom, a riot of colors and fragrances. Aurora had always loved flowers. She had said that they were a reminder of the beauty that could be found even in the darkest of times. As I gazed out at the garden, I thought about my own life, my own struggles, my own fears. I had always been a cautious person, afraid to take risks, afraid to step outside of my comfort zone. But Aurora's story had awakened something within me, a sense of possibility, a sense of courage that I didn't know I possessed. I knew that I could never fully understand what she had gone through, the challenges she had faced, the sacrifices she had made. But I could honor her memory by living my life with the same strength, the same compassion, the same unwavering spirit that she had embodied. The diary was no longer just a book filled with secrets. It was a testament to the enduring power of love, the transformative power of storytelling, the resilience of the human spirit. It was a reminder that even in the face of death, life could continue, love could endure, and hope could blossom. I sat down at the desk, the diary open before me, and picked up a pen. I didn't know what I was going to write, but I knew that I needed to continue her story, to add my own chapter to the legacy she had created. I needed to share her wisdom, her courage, her love with the world. The words flowed from my pen, a torrent of emotions, a tapestry of memories, a celebration of a life well lived. I wrote about her laughter, her kindness, her unwavering support. I wrote about her stories, her wisdom, her profound understanding of the human heart. I wrote about her struggles, her fears, her unwavering determination to overcome adversity. As I wrote, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a sense of closure that I hadn't felt since her death. I realized that Aurora wasn't truly gone. She lived on in my memories, in my heart, in the stories I would continue to tell. She lived on in the garden she had created, in the flowers that bloomed each spring, in the laughter of children playing in the sun. And she lived on in the diary, a timeless testament to her life, her love, her legacy. A legacy that I would carry with me always. A legacy that would inspire me to live my life with courage, compassion, and unwavering hope. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I closed the diary, its secrets now shared, its power now unleashed. The scratches on the closet door no longer haunted me. They were a reminder of her fight, her strength, her unwavering spirit. I stood up, a sense of purpose filling me. I knew that my life would never be the same. Aurora's story had changed me, had transformed me, had awakened something within me that I had never known existed. I walked out of the study, leaving the diary behind. It was time to step out of the shadows, to embrace the light, to live my life with the same courage and compassion that Aurora had shown me. It was time to honor her memory by sharing her story, by inspiring others to uncover their own hidden stories, by reminding the world that even in the face of darkness, hope can always blossom. The house no longer felt hollow. It felt filled with her presence, filled with her love, filled with her legacy. And as I walked through the rooms, I knew that she was with me, guiding me, supporting me, inspiring me to live my life to the fullest. Because that, I finally understood, was what she had always wanted for me. Not a life free from pain or struggle, but a life filled with purpose, a life filled with love, a life filled with the courage to face whatever challenges came my way. And thanks to her stories, thanks to her diary, I was finally ready to do just that. The peace they spoke of at her funeral wasn't necessarily in her final moments, but in the lasting impact of her life, a peace that now settled within me. My dears, the tale of Aurora, my own grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and untold depths, now rests in your hearts. It is a story etched not in grand pronouncements, but in the whispers of a hidden diary, in the silent screams etched into the wooden prison of a closet. It is a story, I believe, that speaks to the hidden corners of us all, the places where courage flickers like a candle in a relentless wind, where love blossoms even in the most barren of landscapes. It is a story of sacrifice, of choosing a path shrouded in shadows to protect the light of others, a light that, I hope, now shines a little brighter in your own lives. Aurora's life, seemingly ending peacefully in her sleep, held a secret, a truth fiercely guarded, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The scratches on the inside of the closet, a silent scream against the injustice she suffered, a final act of defiance against the darkness that sought to consume her. If the echoes of Aurora's life, have resonated within you, then it has achieved its purpose. Stories, you see, are not merely words strung together. They are living entities, breathed into existence by the teller and sustained by the listener. They are the echoes of our ancestors, the whispers of forgotten dreams, the maps that guide us through the labyrinth of life. And Aurora's story, I believe, is a map pointing towards resilience, towards the unwavering belief in the good that resides, however faintly, within us all. It is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, the human heart can find a way to love, to protect, to endure. Her diary, a fragile vessel filled with the ink of her soul, revealed a life far more complex than the placid surface she presented to the world. It spoke of choices made in the dead of night, of burdens carried in silence, of a love so profound it transcended even her own well-being. It painted a portrait of a woman who, despite the darkness that surrounded her, refused to let her own light be extinguished. She was a guardian, a protector, a silent warrior fighting battles unseen, all for the sake of those she held dear. And that, my dears, is a legacy worth remembering. Aurora's story, the story of the scratches on the inside of the closet, is not just about her. It is about all of us. It is about the secrets we keep, the burdens we carry, the sacrifices we make for the ones we love. It is about the enduring human capacity for both incredible cruelty and breathtaking kindness. It is about the choices we make in the face of adversity, the paths we choose to walk, and the legacy we leave behind. It is a mirror reflecting our own hidden strengths, our own unspoken fears, our own potential for extraordinary acts of love and courage. And now, as the final notes of Aurora's song fade into the twilight, I ask you, if her story has touched your heart, if the echoes of her life have stirred something within you, please, let me know. Let a small spark of recognition flicker. A simple gesture, a silent acknowledgement that her story, her struggle, her love has not been in vain. If you found yourself moved by Aurora's quiet strength, if you felt a pang of recognition in her sacrifices, if the scratches on the inside of the closet whispered a truth you understood, then perhaps, just perhaps, you might consider leaving a small token of your appreciation. A small silent offering to honor the woman who lived a life of untold depths. A small click, a simple like a whisper of recognition that says, I heard her story and it mattered. And if you yearn to hear more stories like Aurora's, stories of resilience, of love, of the hidden corners of the human heart, then I invite you to join our little community. Subscribe to our channel, and let us continue to explore the tapestry of human experience together. Let us delve into the lives of ordinary people who lived extraordinary lives, who faced unimaginable challenges with unwavering courage, who left behind legacies that continue to inspire us today. Let us keep their stories alive, let us learn from their experiences, and let us honor their memories by striving to be better versions of ourselves. Because the truth is, my dears, we are all connected. We are all threads in the same intricate fabric, woven together by the shared experiences of joy and sorrow, of love and loss, of hope and despair. And when we hear each other's stories, when we truly listen to the whispers of the past, we begin to understand ourselves and each other a little bit better. We begin to see the world through a different lens, a lens that is filled with compassion, with empathy, and with a deep appreciation for the beauty and fragility of the human condition. And now, as I prepare to bid you farewell, I leave you with one final thought, one final question that I hope will linger in your minds long after the last word has been spoken. What secret do you believe Grandma Aurora held closest to her heart? What unspoken truth, what hidden desire, what burning passion fueled her extraordinary life? Was it the love for her family, the unwavering dedication to their well-being? Was it the burning desire to protect them from the darkness that threatened to engulf them? Was it the quiet strength that allowed her to endure unimaginable hardship without ever losing her faith in the goodness of humanity? Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Perhaps it was a secret she took with her to the grave, a truth that remains forever etched into the scratches on the inside of the closet, a whisper lost in the echoes of time. I encourage you to share your thoughts below. What resonated most with you? What questions does Aurora's story leave you pondering? What emotions did it stir within you? Let us create a space for reflection, for conversation, for connection. Let us honor Aurora's memory by engaging with her story, by exploring its themes, and by sharing our own experiences. And finally, remember this, my dears. Every life is a story waiting to be told. Every heart holds secrets waiting to be discovered. Every scratch on the inside of a closet whispers a truth waiting to be heard. So listen closely, pay attention to the details, and never underestimate the power of a single story to change the world. Because the stories we tell, the stories we share, the stories we remember, are the stories that define us. They are the stories that shape our lives, that guide our actions, and that ultimately determine the legacy we leave behind. Thank you for listening to Aurora's story. Thank you for opening your hearts to her pain, her strength, and her love. And thank you for helping to keep her memory alive. May her story inspire you to live a life filled with courage, with compassion, and with an unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. And may you always remember the scratches on the inside of the closet, a silent testament to the enduring power of love in the face of unimaginable darkness. And now, my dears, it is time for me to say goodbye. But before I go, I want to leave you with one final thought, a thought that I hope will stay with you long after I am gone. Remember that even in the darkest of times, even when you feel like you are all alone, there is always hope. There is always light. There is always love. And there is always a story waiting to be told. So keep listening, keep sharing, and keep believing. Because the world needs your stories, your voices, and your hearts. The world needs you. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit filled with hope, I bid you farewell. May your lives be filled with joy, with love, and with countless stories waiting to be told. And may you always remember the woman who lived a life of untold depths, the woman whose story is now forever etched in your hearts. Goodbye, my dears. And may Aurora's memory be a blessing.